The late afternoon sun slanted through the eucalyptus trees of Golden Gate Park, scattering pale light across the gravel paths. Aaron Miller walked slowly, his tailored coat buttoned tight against the breeze. One hand holding his daughter Lily's small fingers. She was skipping beside him, her braids bouncing, her laughter filling the quiet space between joggers and strollers passing by. "Daddy, look," she said suddenly, tugging on his sleeve. Her voice was urgent, almost breathless. Aaron followed her gaze toward a weathered bench near the duck pond. A boy sat there, thin as a shadow, his clothes ragged, his hair uncombed. He couldn't have been more than 10. But what made Aaron freeze, what made his heart stutter, were the boy's eyes. Bright, unmistakably blue. "Daddy?" Lily whispered again, her small hand tightening around his. "That's my brother." For a long, stunned moment, Aaron couldn't breathe. The boy on the bench looked up, startled by their attention. And in his face, those eyes so impossibly like Lily's, Aaron saw something he had spent years burying. Something that was suddenly, shockingly, alive again. Aaron hesitated, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel as Lily pulled him closer. The boy shifted uncomfortably, clutching something in his lap. A small, worn cardboard box, the edges soft from too many hands and too much weather. Up close, Aaron noticed how pale the child was, his cheeks hollow, his hair in messy strands. But it wasn't the hunger that struck Aaron most. It was the way the boy's gaze flickered, wary, guarded, as if he had already learned not to expect kindness. Lily, fearless, stepped right in front of him. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm Lily. What's your name?" The boy looked from her to Aaron, uncertain, then back again. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Ethan." Aaron crouched slowly, his expensive coat brushing the ground. His mouth felt dry. "Hello, Ethan. Are you here alone?" The boy nodded once, then tightened his arms around the box. His lips trembled before he spoke. "My mom's at home. She's sick. I was supposed to find food, but..." His voice cracked. "There isn't any." Aaron felt his chest tighten, a deep ache unfurling where he hadn't let himself feel for years. "Where's your father?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. Ethan blinked, the blue of his eyes startling in the fading light. "Don't have one. He left before I was born." The words fell like stones. Aaron glanced at Lily, who was watching him with wide, unblinking eyes. Something unspoken passed between them. Children sensed more than adults ever admitted. Aaron looked back at the boy. "What's in the box?" he asked gently. Ethan hesitated, then lifted the lid just enough to show a jumble of treasures. A cracked marble, a toy car missing a wheel, a paper star folded clumsily but carefully. At the very bottom, Aaron saw a photograph curled at the edges. A woman with tired eyes, smiling faintly at the camera. "My mom," Ethan whispered. "She says to keep this safe. Always." Aaron's throat closed. He knew that face. Sarah Collins. The name cut through him like a blade, dragging with it memories he had buried under years of board meetings and success. Sarah, his assistant, the one who had left the company suddenly, without goodbye, after a bitter dispute. He remembered her trying to reach him, her messages he never returned. He had told himself it was nothing, just business. Now the boy's blue eyes stared back at him, his own eyes reflected in another face. Aaron staggered to his feet, his hands shaking. He looked down at Ethan again, at the box clutched like a lifeline, at the faint resemblance in his jaw, in the tilt of his head. Couldn't be. But deep down, in the marrow of him, he already knew. The evening fog was settling over San Francisco, softening the outlines of the park into a gray blur. Aaron walked a few paces away from the bench, his mind spinning, while Lily stayed close to Ethan, chatting with the fearless ease only children possess. He could hear her small voice asking about the toy car, about the paper star, about Ethan's favorite color. Each answer was quiet, but real. Aaron, meanwhile, felt like the ground beneath him had tilted. Sarah Collins. The name pulsed in his skull. He hadn't spoken it aloud in nearly a decade. He remembered the day she'd left his office. Her face pale with anger, her voice trembling as she said, "You can't just erase people, Aaron." He had dismissed her, thinking only of his growing empire, of the next deal, the next profit margin. He had built walls around his life then, tall enough to block out anyone who might slow him down. And Sarah, she had been swallowed by those walls. He told himself she was dramatic, unreliable. But now, staring at Ethan, he wondered if she had been desperate instead, and if he had been too blind or too arrogant to see it. A flicker of memory stabbed through him. His phone buzzing late at night, Sarah's number flashing on the screen. He hadn't answered. Then came the emails, short, pleading, some half-written, cut off mid-sentence. He had archived them without reading. His assistant at the time had asked if he wanted her blocked, and he had nodded. He thought she was angry about losing her position. But what if it had been something else? Something far greater? Aaron pressed a hand to his chest, his breath catching. He glanced back at Ethan, who was now holding Lily's crayon from her pocket, sketching clumsy stars on the back of a receipt. A boy with his eyes, Sarah's smile, and a box of treasures instead of a home. It made too much sense. He had always prided himself on precision, on seeing what others overlooked, on predicting the smallest shifts in a market. But in his personal life, he had missed something so glaring it now felt impossible. His son. The word came unbidden, so heavy it nearly brought him to his knees. Aaron turned away sharply, his gaze fixed on the pond where ducks drifted lazily through the mist. His reflection shimmered on the water's surface, fractured by ripples. He looked at himself, at the silver at his temples, the expensive coat, the life of plenty he had built. And in that reflection he also saw what was missing. Not just the boy, not just Sarah, but the man he could have been, the father he never was. For years, guilt had been a shadow he ignored. It caught up to him at night sometimes, in the silence between board meetings and flights, when Lily was asleep in her room. But he had always buried it. Work was easier. Deals were cleaner. Love was messy, responsibility heavier. Now guilt was no shadow. It stood before him in the shape of a boy with a cardboard box. "Daddy!" Lily's voice cut through the fog. She had left the bench and was tugging at his sleeve again. "He's hungry." Aaron turned, and Ethan was standing now, small shoulders hunched, eyes wary but hopeful. The look in them wasn't just hunger for food. It was hunger for something larger, something Aaron wasn't sure he knew how to give. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "Ethan, your mother, Sarah, do you still live with her?" The boy nodded. "She's not well. She tries, but—" He trailed off, lowering his gaze to the gravel path. "I help when I can." Aaron's pulse throbbed in his ears. Sarah, sick, struggling, raising a child alone while he signed contracts and built skyscrapers in his name. His empire had grown on silence, on the foundation of one woman's absence. He wanted to deny it, to tell himself there were too many coincidences, that he was imagining the resemblance. But he knew. The truth was written in Ethan's face, in the way his fingers curled protectively around the box, in the blue eyes staring back at him like mirrors. He had a son. And for the first time in years, Aaron Miller, the man who had thought himself untouchable, felt small. The neon diner sign buzzed faintly above them, casting a red glow over the sidewalk as they stepped out into the night. Ethan carried his box carefully under one arm, his other hand shoved into the pocket of his too-thin jacket. Lily skipped beside him, unfazed by the chill, her energy undimmed. Aaron walked a step behind, torn between two impulses, to take the boy's hand as he did Lily's, or to keep the distance. His chest ached with the weight of it, the possibility, the near certainty, that this boy was his son. He ordered a car instead of driving. On the ride through the dark streets of San Francisco, the children sat pressed together in the back seat, whispering. Aaron listened without meaning to. Lily told Ethan about her school, about her goldfish named Star, about the treehouse she and her father had built last summer. Ethan responded in short sentences, but his voice grew steadier with each word. He described the paper stars his mother taught him to fold, the stray cat that sometimes slept by their door, the way he could make soup from almost nothing. Aaron stared out the window, the lights of the city sliding past like ghosts. His mind replayed the years he had built his empire, the long nights, the boardroom victories, the endless hunger for more. And behind those memories came Sarah's face, the unanswered messages, the silence he had convinced himself was strength. When the car pulled up before his home, Ethan froze. The house loomed in pale stone and glass, lit warmly from within, a sharp contrast to the shadowed streets behind them. He clutched his box tighter, his eyes wide. "It's just for tonight," Aaron said softly, as if to reassure them both. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately, the faint scent of cedar, the gleam of polished floors. Ethan stopped just past the threshold, looking down at his worn shoes on the immaculate rug. He shifted uncomfortably, as though he might dirty the air itself by breathing too deeply. Lily, oblivious, tugged him forward. "Come on. You have to see my room. It's got a rocket lamp." Ethan hesitated, then followed, his steps cautious, as if he were moving through a museum where nothing could be touched. Aaron watched them disappear up the staircase. His home had never felt so large, so cavernous. He poured himself a drink in the kitchen, but the glass trembled in his hand, the amber liquid sloshing. He set it down untouched. When he finally went upstairs, the sight stopped him cold. Lily and Ethan were curled together on the rug, a blanket thrown over them. Ethan's box was wedged safely between them, his small hand resting protectively on the lid even in sleep. Lily's head rested on his shoulder, their breathing slow and even, perfectly in sync. Aaron leaned against the doorway, the ache in his chest almost unbearable. He saw not only what was but what had been denied. Birthdays missed, nights of hunger endured. A boy growing up fatherless while he measured success in profits. He wanted to move, to adjust the blanket, to kneel beside them, but he couldn't. His legs felt like stone. Instead, he closed the door gently, the soft click echoing down the hall. In the silence of his home, he realized the truth he had spent years avoiding. Wealth could fill every corner of his life, but it could not erase absence. And absence had a face now, a boy asleep under his roof. Aaron pressed his hand against the wall for balance. He was a man accustomed to control, to solutions, to decisive action. But tonight he had stepped into a story he couldn't buy his way out of. And still, for the first time in years, he felt something beyond guilt. A fragile, flickering possibility. That maybe it wasn't too late. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Aaron's house, washing the rooms in pale gold. The city outside was already alive. The hum of traffic, the cry of gulls carried from the bay, but inside it was quiet. Too quiet. Aaron stood in the doorway of Lily's room. Both children were still asleep, curled together beneath a quilt. Ethan's box rested on the nightstand, his small hand draped across it even in dreams. The sight cut Aaron deeply. Lily, safe and loved, had never known hunger. But Ethan, his son, had carried his whole world in a battered cardboard box. The decision formed in him like a knot tightening. He had to see Sarah. Her address was easy to find, buried in old HR files he had once ignored. A shabby building in the Tenderloin district, its bricks stained with rain and time. Aaron climbed the narrow stairs, the stench of mildew and fried food pressing in. Each step felt heavier than the last. When the door opened, he almost didn't recognize her. Sarah stood framed in the dim hallway light, her once bright hair now streaked with gray, her face thinner, etched by years he had not shared. But her eyes, sharp, unflinching, were the same. "Aaron," she said flatly. No surprise, no welcome. Just his name like a verdict. He cleared his throat. "Sarah, we need to talk." Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "Why now?" Behind her, the apartment was small and worn, wallpaper peeling, a stack of unpaid bills on the counter. He saw a blanket tossed across the couch, a faint indentation where Ethan must have slept before. His chest tightened. "Because of Ethan," Aaron said. The silence stretched, heavy, until Sarah stepped aside. "Come in. But don't think money fixes everything." Inside, the air was thick with the smell of boiled coffee and damp laundry. Aaron sat stiffly on the edge of a chair while Sarah remained standing, arms crossed. "He looks like you," Aaron said quietly. Her laugh was short, bitter. "You noticed. Took you long enough." He winced. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," she shot back. Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. "I called, emailed. I begged you to talk to me. You shut the door before I could even explain." Aaron's mouth went dry. I thought it was about your job. About the company. It was about a child," she snapped. Then softer, "Our child. And when you didn't answer, I realized I was alone." The words struck like blows. For years, he had told himself her silence was mutual, that she had simply vanished. But now the truth sat before him, undeniable. "I want to be in his life," Aaron said at last. His voice shook. "I can't undo the past, but I can do better now." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Do you even know what better means? It's not just food and money, Aaron. It's nights of fevers, school projects, nightmares. It's being there when no one else is. Can you do that? Or will you disappear the moment your board panics about headlines?" Aaron leaned forward, desperation in his chest. "Then let me prove it. Please." For a long moment, she studied him, weighing the man before her against the one she had once known. Finally, she sighed. "There's a clinic down the street. We'll do a test. I want proof." The sterile hum of the lab was unbearable. Aaron sat stiffly in the plastic chair, his palms sweating, while Ethan swung his legs beside him, unaware of the storm around him. Sarah stood by the wall, arms folded, silent. The results came back in less than a week. A single sheet of paper, numbers in black and white. 99.9% positive. Aaron's hand trembled as he held it. Ethan looked up, curious. Sarah's face betrayed nothing, though her lips pressed into a thin line. The truth was undeniable now, written not just in Ethan's eyes but in science itself. Aaron folded the paper carefully, as though it were something sacred, and whispered, almost to himself, "My son." The news broke faster than Aaron could contain it. It began as whispers on business blogs. A photograph snapped outside the clinic, Aaron walking with Ethan at his side. By evening, it was headlines. Millionaire's secret child exposed. Aaron Miller's hidden past threatens empire. The phone at his office rang without pause. His assistant's voice trembled as she passed on messages from investors, reporters, even old friends suddenly curious. By morning, the board had called an emergency meeting. Aaron sat at the long table of glass and steel, his reflection staring back at him from its polished surface. Around him, the directors shifted in their seats, their suits sharp, their faces colder than the skyline beyond the windows. One of them, a silver-haired man named Harrington, leaned forward. "This is a liability. Investors are already nervous. We can't have scandals tied to your personal life." Another added sharply, "The boy doesn't even have your name. For all we know, this could be opportunism. Handle it quietly, settle whatever claims there are. But distance yourself before it spreads further." Aaron listened, his pulse steady but his hands clenched tight in his lap. Their words felt like static, a chorus of strategies to erase, to silence, to bury. He had lived his whole career like this, protecting the image, feeding the machine. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Ethan asleep on Lily's floor, the cardboard box tucked beneath his arm. He saw Sarah's tired smile, her warning that money could not fix everything. And suddenly the boardroom felt suffocating, alien. He stood. The movement startled them. "You think this is a scandal," he said, his voice quiet but cutting. "I don't." Harrington frowned. "Aaron." Aaron raised a hand, silencing him. "This isn't about damage control. This is about my son. Denying him would be the true scandal." The room buzzed with uneasy murmurs. A woman at the far end of the table spoke sharply. "If you insist on making this personal, you risk the company's stability. The market doesn't forgive sentiment." Aaron looked out the window at the skyline. Towers of glass he had built, symbols of his ambition. For years they had been his measure of worth. But none of them had his blue eyes. None of them called him Daddy. "Then let it risk everything," he said, turning back to them. "Because for once, I'm not going to walk away." By the time he left the building, the paparazzi were waiting. Cameras flashed, questions fired like bullets. "Mr. Miller, is it true you abandoned the boy's mother? Are you acknowledging paternity? Will this affect your position as CEO?" Aaron shielded his eyes from the lights but didn't hide. "This isn't a scandal," he said evenly. "This is my son." The words echoed through the frenzy, caught on a dozen microphones, repeated within hours across every network. That evening, he returned home. Lily met him at the door, her arms crossed, her small face serious. "People at school were saying things," she whispered. "They said Ethan doesn't belong here." Aaron knelt, pulling her close. "Ethan belongs with us," he said firmly. She nodded, her chin trembling, then marched upstairs. Moments later her voice rang down the hall, fierce and protective. "Leave him alone. He's my brother." Aaron stood in the quiet entryway, his throat tight. For years, he had built an empire of stone and glass. Now it trembled. But for the first time, he realized it was worth something only if he stood inside it with those he loved. Not alone. The weeks that followed were stormy. Cameras outside the gates, headlines dissecting every choice, whispers in boardrooms. Yet inside Aaron's house, life slowly took shape in new ways. Ethan moved carefully at first, always clutching his box, always watching the door as if expecting to be sent away. But Lily never let go of his hand. She dragged him into board games, taught him the rules of their treehouse, insisted he sit beside her at every meal. At school, when other children teased, Lily stood tall. "He's my brother," she declared. "Say it again and see what happens." Her fierceness silenced even the boldest. Sarah kept her distance at first, wary, her guard high. She visited only when Ethan asked. She sat stiffly at Aaron's dining table, her eyes scanning the polished surfaces, the life she'd never known. "Don't think this erases the years," she warned him. "I know," Aaron replied. He never argued, never defended himself. He simply showed up, at doctor's visits, at parent meetings, in the quiet moments when Ethan needed someone to steady his hand. Slowly, something shifted. Sarah saw Ethan's laughter return, saw the way Aaron bent down to tie his shoelaces, the way Lily leaned against him with trust that came naturally. The bitterness she carried like armor began to soften. One evening, Ethan brought his box to the table. He lifted the photo of Sarah, the one he had guarded so fiercely, and set it beside Aaron's place. "So you don't forget," he said simply. Aaron's eyes burned. He reached across and covered Ethan's small hand with his own. In that silence, Sarah exhaled, long and tired, but softer than before. The family was not perfect. The world outside still watched, judged, speculated. But within those walls, something fragile had begun to mend. Trust was not rebuilt overnight, but it grew, in laughter over burnt pancakes, in evenings spent on the couch with Ethan between them, in Lily's drawings of 4 figures holding hands. And slowly, love returned. Once broken, they were becoming whole again. Not the family Aaron had once imagined, but the one he was finally brave enough to claim.